Hi all, DT Neal here, talking about storytelling genre, science fiction, writer issues, sort of things like that. You know, one thing, if you're doing any kind of science fiction, the what if of it comes into play. And you're always thinking, well, what if this happened? What if we did this? What if that was the case? And one that I've mulled over, and I really haven't seen it, at least cinematically done, is assuming humanity survives this current era and we're able to travel off into space and colonize other worlds, assuming that can even happen. What happens to all of the life here on Earth? Are we, big and small, and it's perhaps more of an issue with larger life, and I've only seen it dealt with in that one Star Trek, I think it was The Voyage Home, where the alien consciousness that's coming looking for humpback whales, which had gone extinct in the Star Trek world, and they had to go back in time and bring them back and, save the Earth from annihilation because of the whales. Anyway, I can't help but think about what we would do if we began successfully colonizing other worlds, which again is a huge lift, and I don't know if we're going to make that lift, but let's just, for the sake of argument, think that we can. What do we do with all the other species that are here? The big ones, the whales, sharks, jellyfish, giant squids, horses, cows, pigs, all those things, moose, wolves, elk, Nile crocodiles. Are we going to, in a hypothetical scenario where humanity can colonize other planets, are we going to, because let's not forget, the ultimate fate of this planet is to be heat pasteurized by the sun when the sun eventually dies. Now, admittedly, these are problems long in the future. However, if we're allowing for the possibility of us to colonize other planets, what do we do with those life forms? Do we gene sequence everything on the Earth, like absolutely everything, and to be able to reproduce it in some fashion in those new worlds? Do we leave them here, leave them behind, and let them be destroyed because they can't build spaceships and escape? They're stuck here with us currently, but if we're able to get our ticket out, will there be a mindset of evacuating specimens from this planet? Trees too, all the plant life, all the animal life, and then do we then take that and settle it in those new worlds along with us? And who gets to go? Who decides? Right? I mean, you could, you're colonizing Mars, terraforming it in some fashion. Somebody's like, what this planet needs? Whales. We gotta get whales, but you can't just get whales there because you gotta get plankton there, right? And the logistical challenges begin to magnify. You have a planet and say, well, let's have horses. Let's have horses on Mars. And I'm assuming we've dealt with like the perchlorate issues and all those other things, but it's like, how does that even happen? Who becomes a space rancher, with their horses on Mars? And you think about the logistical challenges of transporting something like that, and then them being on a new planet, and how crazy that would be. I mean, it would almost immediately, very, very, the different conditions on those planets, like all the animal life that we know is supremely adapted to life on Earth. You take them to another planet, though, all bets are off. How they're going to respond to that, how they're going to if they're even going to be able to live, or it's going to be too much. Again, getting around that through somehow a miraculous amount of gene sequencing and ability to reproduce something, a living organism like that on a new world, that gets around a lot of the transport issues. But there's all kinds of related issues of that, any organism living on Earth is bound up in an ecological web, right? And it's just weird to think about that. And so part of me, because I feel they always skirt around that because they're busy trying to appear futuristic when they have space colonies. But I think about that, like, what about all that animal life? Are we just going to go, see ya? You guys were nice. But then on the other side of things, you think, well, the smaller animals, dogs, cats, the little ones, those are easier to transport. When we had Jones in Alien, right? Jones, the ship cat, perfectly comfortable living out in deep space, xenomorph populated deep space. But so with the little animals, you can kind of see that more. People will want their comfort animals in space, no doubt, emotional support animals. But the bigger ones, I don't know, lions, tigers, bears, oh my, what's going to happen to them? What happens to them if and when humanity's able to get off of this rock? Just a philosophical. I don't have an answer to it, and there's a variety of paths one could go. I've already kind of explored a couple of those. But I do think about that every now and then in terms of space colonization. And there's the issue of, supposing hypothetically you colonize another world where there are already existing life forms, then those animals you're choosing to bring become invasive species. It's very similar to what the English did wherever they went. They would bring like English animals with them so they could make wherever they were settling feel like England, right? Make it feel a little like England, whether it was in Australia or whether it came to be the United States. They just brought these things with them, and then those things would just go crazy relative to the native flora and fauna. So how does that play? Are we the only ones who are allowed to go off into space and colonize? Do we just forget the animals and be like, sorry guys, sorry your planet's going to be eventually destroyed? Sucks to be you. I mean, given how humanity has behaved toward animals and our habitat in general, that kind of blasé nature, I could see that manifesting in some fashion. But it does give me pause in the narrative of human progress. One would think you have to sweat those small details. And what is the moral obligation to another species? What is the human moral obligation to a whale, just picking them because they're big, in an extraterrestrial habitat? Do you bring them along or do you leave them behind? The answer to that dictates a lot of what we would be as a species colonizing other worlds. So, sci-fi thoughts.